My audience is usually kids, second graders and then sixth graders, so I'm a little nervous. So I do have notes to read from. It is from my heart, but I don't want to lose track, so I hope you'll forgive me that I have my notes. On the morning of December 14th, 2012, I had a meeting first thing, which was to begin in the conference room of our school. I walked into that meeting at 9:33 after briefing my sub of the morning math plans. There were 8 others in the room, including Dawn Hochsprung, our principal, Mary Sherlock, our school psychologist, Natalie Green, our lead teacher, a parent whose child we were meeting about, and various other support staff. No sooner had Mary opened up the meeting when we heard from the hallway 3 loud pops. Pop, 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 much louder. But didn't know what it was. Sounded to me like chairs falling, like maybe the custodians were setting up something in the cafeteria. Many of us stood from our seats, and I remember Dawn and I locked eyes. She was saying, "What was that?" as she was sweeping out of the room, followed by Natalie and Mary. As soon as they left our conference room, the hallway erupted in gunfire. We scattered to the 4 corners of the room, still not comprehending what exactly was going on. To me, I had nothing in my experience to tell me that that is what was happening. I thought it was fireworks, which also doesn't make sense. Fireworks would be going on outside. But there would be a barrage of gunfire, followed by momentary silence, followed by more gunfire. During one of the momentary silences, Natalie Hammond, not Green, Green was her maiden name, Natalie silently slipped back into the room, hopping on one foot because she had been shot up one side of her body, her leg, her foot, and her hand. And she whispered, "Dawn and Mary are down." And she laid herself down and pressed herself up against the front wall of our conference room, and she held our conference room door closed with her good hand. And the gunfire erupted again. During the next silence, someone whispered, "We have to call for help. Does anybody have a phone?" And at that time, the only cell phone in the room was in the parent's purse, and her purse was on the table, which was in direct view of the window to our conference room, so nobody dared to reach for it. But there was a phone on the wall that if I had stood, I could pick up the phone and dial, but then I would have been in direct vision of the window. So, not wanting to be that visible, I reached up and batted the phone off the hook and left the receiver dangling from the cord, and I reached up to punch the code that would get us an outside line so that I could call 911. But no sooner had I started punching in the series of numbers that the gunfire erupted again, so I retreated back to my corner and forgot about that phone, just left it dangling. And silence came again. It seemed to be longer this time. We dared to believe that whatever it was over, but we still didn't dare to emerge from the room. There was a different kind of silence in the hall, a different kind of activity. It was hushed movements and We were hopeful that it was help. Someone said we need to pray and began reciting the Our Father. I crawled at this point from my spot in the corner to Natalie, and I just slipped my knees under her head so she could rest her head. Although she was lying on the floor, she was just holding her head up, very tense, not resting. And I replaced my hand with hers on the door. So although we thought it was maybe over, we still were protecting ourselves in our room. Another coworker came from the other corner of the room to Natalie's feet and just stroked her legs and soothed her, encouraging her to breathe. It felt like an endless amount of time as we waited, but finally a police officer gingerly opened the door, and emergency personnel took Natalie to a waiting ambulance, but they didn't want us to leave. We were told to stay put. So I think at this time they didn't know if there was one or multiple perpetrators, and they didn't want to move people who didn't require medical attention. But at this point, we did feel that it was safe to move about the room. So I grabbed the parent's purse and handed it to her, and we took turns making phone calls. And I called my husband, Steve, who worked just down the street at his shop. And I reported to him that there were multiple gunshots fired inside of our school. And our adult son, who was 22 at the time, was in the school, working in the library. Ben has autism, and I was very afraid that he would be very vocal and draw attention to himself. But I later learned from the women who work with him in the library that when they heard the gunfire, they knew to go into lockdown, and they led him to a supply room in the back of the library, and he went quietly. He quietly followed their directions. And once inside that closet, he found a bag of stuffed animals, and he pulled each one out silently and surrounded himself for comfort. Didn't say a word. Once we were able to leave the conference room, we walked past Mary and Dawn, who were lying in the hallway. And even as they took Natalie to a waiting ambulance, and Natalie said what she said, I still couldn't quite process what was happening, and I didn't understand why nobody was helping Mary and Dawn. Why are they just lying there? But I didn't realize until later that there was nothing they could do. Exiting the building, we walked over the shattered glass that was the entry to our school. We were among the first people to walk out of the building, and we were directed to go to the firehouse, which was at the end of our driveway, so that was our emergency evacuation location. But I couldn't leave. I didn't know where my second grade class was. I didn't know where my son was. And I quickly met up with my husband, Steve, in the parking lot because he was on the scene before many of the first responders. And he directed me to wait for my second grade class while he went to find Ben. So I headed back for the building, but of course I wasn't let in, and so I paced the parking lot until my second grade class came out, led by our building sub, Kathleen, who I will forever be grateful to for how she took care of my class that day. In the weeks that followed, once the investigation was complete, the staff was called together for a debriefing by the police before they were to release the final report to the public. And among the details of the investigation was the statement that the single event that saved the most lives that day was the fact that the PA system had been opened and broadcast the shooting throughout the school. Our school was a big rectangle, and we were in the front of the school, and people in the back of the school, if they hadn't heard that through the loudspeaker, they may have heard something was going on, but they may not have known. And then potentially there could have been a lot more people in the hall, kids bringing notes to the office, or even adults investigating, sounds that they had heard. But although distressing to hear, because a lot of people were distressed to hear what they heard over the loudspeaker, but it alerted them to go into lockdown. And everybody did exactly what they were supposed to do. The lieutenant in charge of the investigation added that the remarkable part about this detail was that the PA system was activated by the phone in the conference room, which was left dangling off the hook. And he claimed that this was a mystery because they investigated this thoroughly. That phone in the conference room was not wired to do. The only phone that was wired to broadcast throughout the school was in the front office, which was not attached to our conference room, which is probably why Wikipedia says that, because that's the only phone that was wired. So at this point, the staff members question, well, what are you saying? Are you saying, how could this be? Are you saying it was an act of God? And the lieutenant shrugged his shoulders and he said, I have no explanation.